Viva Health. When you hydrate your body, you feel great. Choose a simple goal to hydrate and feel great. Drink water instead of sugary drinks. Drink only water with meals. Drink at least 8 cups of water each day. For information on how to eat well and feel great, visit sanantonio.gov/health.
Cuando hidratas tu cuerpo, te sientes bien. Elige un reto para hidratarte y sentirte bien. Bebe agua, no bebidas azucaradas. Bebe solo agua con las comidas. Bebe por lo menos 8 vasos de agua por día. Más información en sanantonio.gov/health.
Hello and welcome to the 5th annual San Antonio City Fest. This year's Urban Ideas Festival is available online and in person throughout San Antonio. Through the support of our sponsors, this year's virtual series is free and accessible for all. We invite you to share today's conversation on Facebook or other social media and help ensure that these critical conversations are reaching everyone in the community. Before we begin, we want to take a moment to acknowledge this year's sponsors who partnered with us to make this year's virtual forum free and accessible to all. A special thank you to our 2022 presenting sponsors, the City of San Antonio and Bexar County Economic and Community Development Department. We also thank our engagement and innovation sponsors for supporting this year's event. You can find a full list of them at www.cityfestsa.org. If you find value in local reporting efforts and civic engagement events like this one, we invite you to support our nonprofit newsroom by joining our membership program today. Click out the link in the chat to donate today. This panel on housing is tackling a lot of big questions that don't necessarily have simple answers, but I think we have assembled a group today that has that can help us navigate these waters. Let's meet our panelists today. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Antonio Petrov. He's the founder of Urban Future Lab and associate professor in the UTSA College of Engineering and Integrated Design. And he's a Next Gen faculty leadership fellow. Welcome, Dr. Petrov.
Hi, Iris.
And next we have Mark Carmona, the City of San Antonio's first ever Chief Housing Officer. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Iris.
And Rich Acosta is founder and president of My City is My Home, a nonprofit aimed at educating and supporting homeowners and renters. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Iris.
So have Deborah Guerrero, Vice President of Government Affairs at NRP Group, which has developed more than 50,000 apartment homes across the U.S. And manages more than 26,000 residential units in the U.S.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Kim Jeffries, President and CEO of Haven for Hope, the city's largest shelter and resource hub for people experiencing homelessness. Welcome, Kim.
Happy to be here.
Let's dive right in. I think chief among the questions surrounding housing is how we can ensure that people in Bexar County have safe, affordable places to live in a place where housing costs are vastly outpacing income. A Texas Housers report recently found that nearly half of renters in the area spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which is considered by experts to be unsustainable. And San Antonio saw the largest increase in population of any major city from 2020 to 2021, and millions more are expected. So where are they going to live? And so maybe we could start with you, Mark. Being the chief housing officer, I imagine you encounter these questions from the community members and partners almost every day. So could you kind of give our listeners some background on why the city has a chief housing officer in the first place?
Sure, I'm happy to. So other cities like San Antonio right now are really experiencing a lot of housing related problems. So they're adopting policies, they're developing tools, they're implementing different strategies to try to counteract what's happening with housing affordability. What has been found, what important to these strategies has been kind of the appointment of an executive level position, or a chief housing officer, if you will, a person responsible for leading coordinating and ensuring the successful delivery of housing programs, working with systems. So to ensure that San Antonio is successful in addressing housing affordability, the city created a position housed in the city manager's office, the chief housing officer. It's got a degree of autonomy and accountability, and it brings together the city's housing related functions and coordinates and sees through implementation and strategies, and we try to do that in a transparent manner.
Mhm. And so when you say housing related functions, does that mean, Department of Human Services and obviously the Housing Department and Neighborhood Services Department? Like, what are some of the connections that you make on a daily basis that maybe we aren't aware of? What's your
Great question. So really the main function of this role is to kind of oversee the successful implementation of our strategic housing implementation plan and our homeless strategic plan. But a really important part of the role is really to make connections with other systems that intersect with housing, both within the city and externally with community partners. So kind of to your question, internally, housing connects with human services, development services, health, workforce development, and others. We're working with our partners in the community, such as the county, Opportunity Home San Antonio, the Housing Trust, via school districts, because we need everyone if we're going to address this issue comprehensively. That's what we're doing right. That's what we're focused on right now.
Right. Well, I imagine some of that work includes the housing bond. This is $150 million of voter approved money that will go towards actually building affordable housing. But how big of a dent will that really make towards affordable housing? I think people are pretty anxious to see some movement made. What's the timeline for that?
So the housing bond itself, it's targeted to serve San Antonio's most cost burden low-income populations. It's prioritizing access to transit, regional centers. Most importantly, bond funds are going to impact people living in their homes that need various levels of rehab and preservation. It's going to impact multifamily properties that need significant rehab because we want to keep those units affordable. The construction of new multifamily units and new single family units, and then permanent supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness. So in terms of a dent, I mean, in FY23, the city itself is going to produce and preserve 2,500 units of housing. Now, this doesn't include what our partners will bring to the table. And this is really close to the 2,800 number we need to do annually, either produce or preserve to meet our 10-year goals. So I think the bond itself will help with that. The other thing, Iris, the bond will do is leveraging other funds. And over the 5-year period, this is a key component to our funding or our plan. So tax exemptions, local affordable housing funds, federal funds, partner funds, tax credits, all of those things are going to be really important for us to leverage the dollars that we need in our community. So we have this 5-year housing bond right now. We're looking to leverage funds for that to meet at least our 5-year point.
Right. And y'all are expecting to launch another 5-year bond in 5 years of $150 million.
That's the goal. That's the idea. That's the goal. But we have to hit our marks.
Right.
We have to hit our numbers of either preservation or new production units. And I feel like we will. We have strong partnerships and we have will in our community, I think, to make it happen.
Great. Well, and you mentioned permanent supportive housing. It's kind of a relatively, it's not as well known probably in San Antonio as maybe other cities, but this is a type of housing that's directly focused towards housing chronically homeless individuals. So how has your experience as a former head of Haven for Hope informed your view on the housing crisis?
That's a great question. Well, when I think about it, I think that we need alignment, agility, and adaptability if we're going to achieve our goals. My experience at Haven really took me to an individual level with people, which really stresses the importance of trauma-informed care in all the work that we do. And at a systems level, as we work with so many partners on and off the campus, I think we need to see homelessness is part of our housing continuum, from emergency shelter to market rate. I think it's important to understand what each partner is trying to achieve and how working together we can both meet our goals. And I think one of the big things I learned that's really helping inform my view today is we should really celebrate incremental success with our partners in our community and not always wait for the home run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a few home runs when it comes to housing these days, it seems. And Kim, you are now we're approaching a year since you were hired on as Haven's new CEO. And so while the facility is largely known for its shelter services, I'm wondering if you could kind of put into perspective some of the other work that Haven does, connecting people to housing both on and off site of the campus.
Yeah, I will. I can't believe it's already almost been a year, first of all. Second, I will say I'm born and raised in San Antonio, and I've lived here for 48 years, and I had no idea, first of all, the depth and the breadth of the need in our community, and I get to experience it now every day. But I also, the amount of resources that are available, not just at Haven for Hope and through the partnerships here, but in our homeless response system, and how well those partners work together. Haven was designed, I get to, come into this really cool, innovative design, and I don't get any credit for it because other people have developed it, but it's really to get at the root cause of, homelessness. And so in order to do that, you have to address the trauma that somebody has faced in their past. And so in order to do that, you have to have all of the resources available to them. This place was built to eliminate all the barriers that somebody might have, the obstacles to getting that care. You think about being, a single mom who's homeless and trying to figure out if you're in a traditional shelter setting, you got to leave every day and go try to, haul your kids and your stuff around to get those services that you need to get back on your feet. That doesn't have to happen at Haven. They're here all day. They have a place to live for that time, and they have the time to do what they need to do to address those root cause issues. So we have everything on our campus, whether it's provided by Haven or our partners, case management, housing liaisons that connect them. We have clinical services and counseling. We have income and skills development, vets teams, jail outreach teams that work with local hospital systems to bring people out of hospital systems directly onto our campus so they have time to get back on their feet. Stuff for kids, so many partners for children on our campus. Medical, taking care of those medical needs. Somebody who's been on the streets hasn't taken care of their physical well-being, and they're prone to more challenging, complex issues, diabetes, hypertension, all of these things that require management, ID recovery, counseling. So anything they need to get back on their feet, we have available to them at Haven. I always say it was hard for me at first to figure out where Haven ended and the partners began, but that's a beautiful thing for our clients because they just come here and it's all here and everybody's surrounding them with the support that they need.
Yeah, from the perspective of a client, like they don't necessarily know or need to know where that help is coming from. It's coming. Yeah.
It's there. Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, and you kind of answered one of my next questions about, some of the main barriers that folks are facing. It can be childcare, it can be physical or mental health issues, it could be a wide range of things. What is something that to you is just like so critical and is helping so well, or maybe there's something that maybe hasn't been tried that you would like to see implemented? What are some of the key things that we should be looking out for?
I think challenges, to moving people from a campus like Haven into housing, there's a myriad of those. And I think housing first, and we take a housing first approach when it works, for individuals and moving them in is, for some people it works, but for other people it's addressing those complex issues. And so I think looking at our mental health system, and we have our local mental health authority on our campus, so we have the privilege of having that, but our mental health system and how we can support folks long-term. I think even just, there's some things that are working because of Haven. Haven's been around 12 years now, and so has a housing team that works with certain landlords. If you have a background, certain criminal history backgrounds, it's really hard to find apartments and placement. And so working and building those relationships with local landlords, having that team, the team who works very closely with Opportunity Home, that same housing team. And so I think it's having those experts that have kind of learned how to work the system that can really help clients, get ahead of that. But I think homelessness, is a result of other trauma. And so we've got to look at and address that trauma, and we've got to look at mental health, severe mental illness in our community, take away the stigma, figure out how to support people long-term. And there are some great programs like permanent supportive housing that can do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you mentioned permanent supportive housing. It's kind of a bit of a bigger deal now because there's $42 million between the city and county going towards permanent supportive housing. I mean, do you think that this kind of wraparound help and living situation will reduce the number of people living on the streets or staying maybe at Haven for Hope in a temporary shelter?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were all celebrating in when the housing bond was passed earlier this year because of that, influx of funding for permanent supportive housing. We need 1,000 permanent supportive housing units in our community to support the need that we have. And that's the need over 10 years, but we could fill 600 of those spots today if we had the permanent supportive housing. And so whether they're from our courtyard and our direct referral program or working with our outreach workers across this community through all of our partners, we could place individuals today. It's critical. It's critical to getting particularly the chronically homeless and the unsheltered off, the streets. They're living on the streets, but they're also dying on the streets. And so, permanent supportive housing gives them, we're not just throwing them in a house and saying, go with God and good luck. Permanent supportive housing wraps around them to address those issues. I had a chance to go on some permanent supportive housing visits with our team, and, these people are isolated, they're lonely, they're trying to reestablish relationships with family and community. And so our case managers help them navigate that in order to really reintegrate in community and to be successful in that living environment. And so it's so critical. I mean, all the wraparound services are critical, but even just somebody to come in your home and say, hey, I'm here for you. And what do you need and how can I help you?
That's great. Yeah, I mean, there's a need of people that need housing every single day. Hundreds of people. And I know that, Rich, you also see and help folks get connected to housing to prevent them from ever experiencing homelessness. Some of these folks may have HUD vouchers, some of them may not. What do you see are some of the typical barriers on the ground that people are facing when trying to find an affordable place to live?
Thank you. So we have the largest on mycityismyhome.com. We have the largest, as far as we know, low barrier apartment list. So it shows you all the properties, that over 700 properties, that shows which ones are income-based, tax credit, accepts people with criminal records, evictions, accepts Section 8 vouchers, all types of different barriers and everything. And that's what's the problem, is that not a lot of places advertise that it's like no apartment's going to advertise, I accept felons, come on, it's not a good advertisement kind of thing, but those are people's barriers. And so they're calling around these different apartments and they don't know which ones will take our voucher, which one will take I did a criminal history, I messed up 5 years ago, it was a misdemeanor, and now nobody's letting me into the place. And I think something that comes into play is that we've been relying on empathy a lot for this affordable housing talk and everything. We talk about do you want the senior citizen to be living on the street? Do you want the disabled veteran suffering and dying on the street and everything? I've helped out people. Took me forever to get to her housing, and when we finally did, she died on the floor because there wasn't any furniture into the place. That's a real story. That's a real person. And we talk about empathy all day long, but that's not getting to everybody. And so what I would like people to try to talk when they're talking about affordable housing is the economics approach as well. Homelessness does not help the community, does not help small businesses. People live on the streets, does not help that at all. And if we have more housing, more people are going to be able to be in a position, be in the workforce, be productive and everything. And it's more helpful. I mean, if San Antonio wants to be a tourist destination with how much what we're doing with the Alamo, all right? It's getting all this money to redo it and everything. How is that going to be the vibrant, beautiful thing that we want for the economy, for the city, when there's homeless all around us? So doesn't it benefit more to help house our homeless population than allowing them onto the street and everything? And I'm trying to get these numbers out there and everything, that it costs more for the city as a whole with having emergency hospital visits, crime, and everything. It costs the city taxpayers more money for one person on the street per year than it is to actually house them. If I'm correct, Kim, it's like $25 per person per day to keep somebody at Haven for Hope. If I'm please correct me if I'm wrong, but $25 per day to house somebody at Haven for Hope, on average, is much cheaper than what it costs to cover the healthcare issues and all the churches that are out there spending their donations and everything trying to help out people, when we should be housing them, and it'll be much more cost effective for our economy.
Right. I mean, preventing that homelessness in the first place, obviously the most cost effective way to manage that problem. And My City is My Home has also done a lot of work in property tax protests. So I'm curious if you've seen. This is kind of a different kind of section of folks that y'all help, who have a home that are struggling to pay those property tax bills.
Well, not necessarily. It's about the same. It's the same kind of conversation, because most of the most affordable housing is the housing that you live in today. That's the most affordable. And so if I'm a fixed income person that is living in a home that I've had for the last 30 years, and my taxes just keep going up, I'm going to be taxed out. And then, all right, people say, because My City is My Home is a bunch of real estate agents, volunteering for everybody. And, first thing is like, well, that's a great time to try to sell their homes. Well, if I sell your home for $150,000 or less, what are you going to buy? Where are you going to go? You're going to become a renter, and we don't want that. We want you to want to be a homeowner and stay a homeowner. And so protesting your property tax is what we have to do. And, when you think about, your homeowners that have your homestead exemptions and stuff, that's great and all, but really the homestead exemption, in my experience, helps you the first year that you get it. It capped you from the increase the next year from going up 15-20% or whatever. So it capped you at that 10%, but then next year goes up 10%, and it's capped, but 10%, then 10%. So that becomes unaffordable. So if I could plug, we have a property tax proposal on our website, mycityismyhome.com. If you go to our advocacy page, we are trying to get homeowners to support we got two policies, one that will discount the property tax rate during periods of high valuations. We have some city council members that are supportive of that idea, and then to work with change the property tax code. They'll go up to the Texas legislation that we're hoping for 2025 to be able to allow municipalities to freeze taxable values for not just homeowners that like homestead homeowners, but your landlords, renters. Their rents keep going up because landlords' property tax is going up. And so we're not doing anything to support our landlords, to support our renters. And this is a way to do that. Freezing property tax valuations is how we can solve gentrification issues. When you're yelling at your neighbor for buying a home, remodeling it, because they're going to raise your property taxes. You're yelling at the city, I don't want this new development happening over here because it's going to raise my property taxes and everything. We got to bring dignity back to home ownership, affordability back to home ownership, and really freezing taxable values is the only way to do it. And we have to change that at the Texas level.
Well, and Mark, I want to give you a chance to kind of chime in here. What are some things that the city of San Antonio is looking at in terms of property taxes?
Yeah. So in this new budget, council is providing funds and Neighborhood Housing Services Department is really going to be working on a campaign that helps people work with people to help protest their property taxes, make sure that people are signed up for exemptions. We also have a really big issue on title remediation, especially when we're looking to preserve and rehab homes. There's significant fractured title issues that are going on, airship issues, those kinds of things. So the city's going to be working, Neighborhood Housing Services Department is going to be working really hard at building this campaign, getting this out into the community. We're working on a plan now to get that out. So that's what the city will be focused on related to that particular issue, Iris.
Right. Yeah. Well, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rich, for kind of sharing these, systemic change ideas. It's almost as if we need some sort of idea factory to kind of come up with these kind of creative solutions. And I know, Antonio, for folks who may not be familiar, could you kind of talk about the work that Urban Future Lab does? It is an idea factory, and the work that you're working on now.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for everybody being so passionate about what you're doing. It's really incredible to see that there's lots of people working in the background, although we have this overarching problem that keeps kind of affecting all of us. So the Urban Future Lab, we founded this a couple of years ago, probably I think it's almost 8 now, when we saw a need when we saw San Antonio changing as a city, and not just changing in terms of how it's physically changing in terms of its appearance, more infrastructure, more buildings, et cetera, but also when we saw okay, there's a need for us to think about what it means when it comes to cultural integrity, or humanity on a larger scale, empathy. Rich mentioned that. So we felt like it's important for us to kind of not just play a role in kind of how do we manage growth, but also how do we lead transformation. And we felt the best contribution we can make is by just kind of producing ideas and, taking on a role of being activators, strategic advisors, or people that kind of make conversation, bringing people together that are stakeholders in the conversation and inspire them to kind of go back and make change. So that's how the Urban Future Lab started. And the housing question became interesting to us when I was asked as one of the next gen leadership fellows at UTSA to think about the relationship between UTSA and the West Side. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's some tension there because of the changes affecting the fabric on the West Side, and also associated fears, economic fears, existential fears. And we felt very strongly about the situation that we kind of saw a lot of inspiration actually within all of these tensions that were there, and tried to use them and leverage them as a path forward. And so our idea, and I'm not saying it's a new idea, but we were interested in kind of creating a social contract. We felt like it was important for us to kind of determine what are the values that we have and share, and use those as the foundation for a solution, whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. And in our case, we thought to kind of implement a Casita project, just to kind of give the future, or put the future in the hands of the people that live in these communities, rather than just kind of always looking up for help in the solution. And we, the foundation basically of this social contract and this Casita project is just to say, can we kind of create a tenant program between, let's say, UTSA and the community to kind of make sure there will be, I think, around 15,000 students in the downtown campus area. Mm. And we want to have them live somewhere there and not just kind of be a commuter school. And so are there possibilities for us to kind of establish like a contract or a relationship between those people moving in the area and the people living in the area? We also thought it would be incredibly valuable to use the resources that UTSA has and can offer in kind of educating the community when it comes to taxing and inflation and establishing community trust to alleviate taxes in general and kind of tap into city resources. We also thought it would be interesting to kind of like assist in identifying microfinancing. Because most of the people or some of the people within these communities don't even have access to regular loans. Mm-hmm. And it would be, you know, an interesting approach to say, okay, let's help out with microfinancing so we can kind of like get you on the right track. I think, and I talked a lot to contractors in the last couple of weeks. I think it would be also interesting to kind of like keep things local and kind of stimulate like a local makers economy that's already there, that's existing. Most people within these economies, within these communities, work in construction, and I think it would be incredible just to kind of like employ them within their own communities to build the communities that they want and imagine, and then also kind of like help advocate for code and zoning adjustments moving forward. So that's kind of like outlining this idea of like a social contract and what we imagined the Casita Project to be, how to kind of like address these challenges through ADUs.
Well, and I know that there are upcoming code changes that are aimed at making ADUs or casitas more easier to build, maybe more cheaper, and less infrastructure required for them in terms of like electricity and stuff. And so is the idea to help West Side residents utilize their existing casitas and rent them to possibly students if they want to, and also build casitas with them as well? Is that kind of the combined approach there with your project?
Well, the ideal scenario would be to kind of maybe start with a pilot project, because I think like there's still some hesitance in how it's working. Where do I get the money from? And what about the codes that kind of prevent me from doing this? There's also a lot of hearsay about codes in general. So I maybe, Mark, you can help us out a little bit with some clarity there. You talk to contractors and owners, and a lot of people say a lot of different things, how they have been approached when it comes to especially kind of like utilizing the land that they own. So I think clarity would be great, and we believe that like a pilot project in collaboration with the university, the community, and the city would be a great start to kind of like really kind of like synergize what's there. It's there. It's just waiting to happen. And I think if we kind of can craft a path that kind of can overcome some of those obstacles, it would be a tremendous move in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the timing is good given these pending code changes. Mm. It may be good to kind of demonstrate how those changes, if approved by City Council, can really make this work both for tenants and for landlords and for historically marginalized communities that haven't been able to take advantage of their property as more wealthy areas of the city. So
it's not just the codes, though. I think it's also like, how do people get access to funding? I think that's a huge issue. And again, I think it would be incredible to say, okay, there's a pilot that kind of like deals with the issue of if there's a front house that's not to code, I want to build something in the back, right? What do we do here? Right. There could be a pilot that just kind of like really, kind of like elaborates on funding, or maybe a community trust could be established to alleviate taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's kind of like different ways of how we could approach this issue, but I think it requires the community, the city, and the university to kind of like come together and discuss this.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Petrov. I think it's an incredible program, and I will be following up with you on your project. Deborah, you've been waiting so patiently. Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation so far. But I kind of want to switch gears from kind of this smaller scale type of projects to very large scale projects that you and NRP group works on. I assume that y'all want to build more in San Antonio, but given the rising costs of materials and supply chain issues, I'm curious, like, what are y'all seeing kind of shrinking returns on these projects? Are they becoming harder and harder to build because of these kind of external forces?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to preface all of this with saying that I've been able to see sort of housing policy and the way that it's evolved these last 20 years. Not only as a policymaker when I sat on city council some 20 years ago, but then also in working with NRP now for the last 18 years. I have seen the conversation elevate to such a point that we can have an urban future lab, that we can have a housing czar like Mark, which I'm very excited about. The idea of collaborations with Haven for Hope, and to bootstrap nonprofits to be able to be on the ground and help. So all of this has elevated a conversation from the SHIP all the way to the bond program that we just passed. I'm very excited about that, but the parts, because those parts we can control.
Right.
Parts you cannot. The one thing are those external market forces. And so when you asked Mark about, when will those bonds, when will we start seeing it? What are we talking about in terms of success? That is a lot different now than it was when we first thought about having a bond program. The fact that inflation rates have gone up, construction costs have gone up. So those two things together have created chaos in the markets. And so where the benefit in leveraging our 150 million, and in the case of new production, we're looking at about 40 million. In those cases where we thought the money could go further, it actually isn't able to because of what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. So we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about what success looks like. You asked specifically about the slowdown. I will tell you that in 2020, we closed on 1,017 units, over 1,000 units we closed on. And that included 30%, 50, and 60% units. The affordability that we're talking about all the way down to the deeper affordability. In 2021, we closed on 740 units. Same thing, 30, 50, 60. 2022, and we're in September now? No, October. Forgot. We're now in October. 0 in San Antonio. 0 that have been closed on. We with the help, God willing, with being able to convince some of our partners and going out there and looking for that gap money, we're hoping to close on at least 300, if not 400 units by the end of the year, if we're lucky. But but we're not there yet. Mm. And so the fact is that these external forces truly do have an impact on the production and is creating an even bigger challenge right now.
So it sounds like it has kind of slowed that speed of production, and even maybe decreased interest in pursuing those because they are so hard to actually make happen.
Well, and in some cases, I'll tell you that NRP at their core, the mission has always been affordable housing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other developers out there that it's not necessarily that. So they are moving from doing an affordable deal to doing a market rate deal. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because with market rate developments, you can raise your rents as high as to cover all of these escalating costs, right? And so we're seeing market rate of rents increasing at 15 to 20%. You go down the road to our friends in Austin, they're going even higher. I mean, and the fact is, we don't want to be all of those. We live in a population where 1.5 people are truly living in poverty. We know that, right? And so, but there is needed every single income band. So one of the ways that we can mitigate that is to truly build at every income level and be able to support that. Mm-hmm. But leveraging this housing bond and taking the federal, state, and any other sources that are out there is really going to be the key to address the affordability for those that really need it and to meet the SHIP goals. The one thing I love about SHIP is it's not just about producing housing. It's about how job training. It's about how do we do preservation. It's about, I mean, there's just it's all inclusive, and it's holistic in its approach for the next 10 years. But at this point right now, we are in a challenge. And I think we're probably going to look at it again in 5 years and see where we are there. And it may change. But the fact is, we're talking about it. And everybody on this call are part of really what that will look like. And so I'm just excited that we're talking about it.
Yeah. Well, and, in addition to those challenges, other hurdles I often see affordable housing projects face are issues of NIMBYism and fear of density. That even occurs with permanent supportive housing and homelessness shelters. So I wonder, given your experience in San Antonio, Deborah, like, have you kind of seen a change in that pushback over the years? Like, have people become more used to or accepting of affordable housing, or is it still kind of a major challenge?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I do believe that this last general bond election proved that the community does get it. They understand that affordable housing is a real issue. The conversation's not only been elevated locally, but nationally. So, and people are feeling it at every income band. I mean, even your 80 to 100% and beyond up to 120%. So yeah, I mean, the conversation has definitely shifted. You're also seeing that in some communities, they've realized that there's a value in having people live near where they work, because they want all that retail and they want all those services. But those transportation costs, or the idea of getting people to actually work there, it's important that they be located near. So yes, there has been a shift. I think where there's still a lot of education to be done. And I'm sorry, and the second thing is leadership. The fact that the mayor and the council, and they're leading these discussions, and then also over at the county. I mean, the county has realized the importance of collaborating and leveraging with not only the state and the Fed programs, but with the city, so that it is truly a collaborative effort. So there's a lot of leadership that is now taking this on. I think where we still need to do some education is in those communities where we are going in and we're talking about mixed income communities, that because there is a fear that if we go into some communities, it either causes gentrification because it's a reinvestment, or that we're displacing people. Right. So I do think that the city's approach with their displacement policy is, and I appreciate the fact that they've involved stakeholders, is a good way to sort of alleviate and mitigate some of those concerns, because that is not the intent. At the end of the day, the way that we have approached things is that we want to reinvest and use the tools that are out there to reinvest in communities that have not seen investment in a long time, and create quality, affordable housing for working families and children. And if we're going to use those tools to do that, but we do have to work with the city to prove that this isn't a displacement project, that what this truly is, it's a reinvestment, and it'll be a positive benefit to the community.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of been the catch-22 of any investment that a city or a private company makes, is that, like, the consequences of that could end up displacing folks. And yeah, I have written a little bit about the that kind of tool that the city is working on to make sure that that there's some real thought being made about what the unintended consequences could be down the road. And it's a brand new tool, and I look forward to learning more about it once it gets developed. But I kind of want to open that question up to the whole panel. This idea, like this kind of stigma associated with affordable housing projects. I mean, Rich, you mentioned that when it comes to voucher holders. So what are your thinking and feeling about the community's thoughts about this type of housing? Like, obviously they supported it in the bond, but it's different when it's in your backyard.
Yeah, I think Iris, it's an important question, and I think it's an important question for the whole community. when I first started as the chief housing officer, I spent a lot of time in community in different parts of the city. And I think the term affordable housing has really been saturated with people. I think folks they're just not resonating with that term anymore. I think we need a new narrative. I think we need new frames in which to talk about really housing affordability. Because as you talk to people and they worry about affordable housing in their communities, the reality is it's already there. It's the family that lives 2 blocks down, that your kids play at their house and their kids spend the night at your house, but you don't know that they have a housing voucher.
Right.
So it exists in the community, but I think education and information, and the city's working with its partners on creating an education campaign, information campaign for that, to have conversations. And I think it has to be organic, person to person, to really begin to have an understanding of what it is and what it's not. And I think there's a lot of misinformation or maybe old information that people are operating under. So those are some thoughts.
Well, and then also we need to start redefining housing as an economic development generator, or as just as necessary an infrastructure. Affordable housing affordability is just as important as having water and good transportation. And I mean, we even talk about like cultural, right? To not only draw jobs here, but to retain jobs here. And so we need to start thinking of housing in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of troublesome when we kind of like still have people that are creating sprawl actually and generating, basically a lot of money that taxpayers pay gets into big infrastructural projects for someone that builds out, a community out there. And if this research has shown that those are high risk investments and they get rewarded, right? And so you're right, Deborah. I think we need to look at whether that's affordable housing or not. We have to, as Mark said, we have to think about like maybe reframing this bigger notion, but we need to look at it as an economic development tool, which I think like San Antonio as a city needs desperately, because I think like that puts a shadow on where we're going as a city in the future for sure. Because like right now, wherever you go, you see developments. It goes so fast. You don't go for 2 weeks in a part of the city, and then all of a sudden, like they just took everything down and building another one of those suburban developments, while we are kind of like desperately looking for solutions to kind of like think about things within the city. So they're still rewarded for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how this could be changed.
I got 2 things for vouchers. One, I want everybody to know that are listening. I know we're going to get messages in the chat about this, but in my experience in real estate, working with renters and everything, it doesn't matter if you make $150,000 a year. There's just as much a chance of a voucher holder having damage to your property as much as any other renter. In actuality, if you look at the numbers, the eviction rate is lower on average for voucher holders than it is for your average renter. Because a voucher holder, if they get evicted, they lose their voucher. So if, let's say they're in a home that is the voucher's covering $1,500 a month in rent, that's a job, right? That's an income, right? You couldn't afford that without this voucher, so you're going to do your best to do it. What I find in my experience is more of the issue when it comes to our voucher holders and maintaining the home is just when it comes to tenant maintenance, they just can't afford to do all the repairs. And that's where I see the issues come in. Like if they're in a HOA and the trash can is left overnight and they get a ticket, and then it just compounds the issues. So no, in my experience, they're just as accessible to damaging the home as any other renter, not more than the other. But the other issue with the housing vouchers is that, vouchers, that what's on that shopping estimate, that's not necessarily the amount that the voucher will actually cover, right? And we find that issue with the vouchers that they're sending out tenants, voucher holders, and telling landlords, we're going to pay this amount of money on your on their voucher that's stated on there, but then when it actually comes into play, after the voucher holder applies for the property, they have to go through the same background check, whatever the landlord's background checks are, same thing as anybody else. Then there's an inspection just for like health and safety, making sure that, you know, the roof isn't falling apart or something like that. And after all that, then they do this rent reasonableness. And then, you know, they could, whatever the landlord is renting for, they could, you know, try to bring that down, saying that, well, we did our little analysis and we think it's worth a little less than that. Well, the problem with that is that, you know, landlords just took their properties off the market for a week or two, and now the housing authority is telling them to lower the rent. And we've been suggesting to the housing authority to do a pre-rent reasonableness thing. So that way landlords can tell the housing authority, this is the home that I want to start accepting vouchers. Can you tell me what you guys would cover? And so that way they can know up front instead of wasting all this time. And then we are also asking the housing authority to do an open bid to do what's called a tenant-based voucher transfer to a project-based voucher. I know it's a little complicated, but what it does is it takes the voucher and gives it to the house. So now the house is in contract for 5, 10 years, set aside for Section 8 only, which will then give those families long-term stability. And there are landlords right now that will do this kind of deal if it's open to all landlords. So those are just some easy things. So yes, the housing authority is great service they're providing to the community to allow affordability, but there is some housing barrier within their own systems as well that needs to be corrected.
Right. Well, and Kim, I want to give you kind of an opportunity. I mean, what has been your experience with the surrounding community around Haven for Hope?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge. I think people, what I always say, especially, we had some great projects that were up. There was one in San Pedro that got quashed because of the community. And so what I encourage people to do is get curious, because I think people carry these myths that there's more crime, or there's more damage to property, there's more of this, there's going to be these things in my neighborhood, without doing their research. And so get curious, ask the questions, look at the data, ask for the data, look at those things before you make decisions about what's happening in your community. Haven's worked really hard to intentionally develop relationships with, the folks on the west side here in our community, whether it's, we just had National Night Out and, invited our neighbors to come, just doing those simple things to say, at the end of the day, the people, 1,600 people on our campus are just like me and you, but by the grace of God go I. And so, many of us are one paycheck away from being without a place to live. And we may have support networks, but other people may not. And so, I think it's that human factor. If you can just kind of, get curious, don't look away, know that these are humans. Don't look away from the challenge and the issue. Look at it, dig into it. And you'll find, everybody that's experiencing homelessness is not very different than you or I. They just have a different set of circumstances in their life that they've been dealt, and they might not have had the resources that we had available to us.
Right. Yeah. Get curious. I really like that. As a journalist, I appreciate curiosity a lot. And that may answer my final question for all. But of course, you're welcome to answer it in a different way. I kind of want to close this out with a little bit of call to action, a little bit. Panelists, I'm curious what you think residents can do to help solve these really big problems that seem to have no end. Affordable housing and homelessness issues. Maybe there's a rule or a code, or getting curious, for instance. What would you like our readers and our viewers to take away with them into their daily lives? That's open for anyone.
Iris, I think today that the thing that's on my mind is, if readers and folks listening in today could take the time to understand what our homeless response system is in our community. Mm-hmm. You have nonprofits like Haven and others that are specifically working with the population. You've got local government. You have our mental health authority. You have our local COC. And I think if people understand how it's coordinated and it's effective, does it have gaps? Absolutely. Does it need help? Yes. And we want people's help. We want people to help. And I guess the challenge is, will people take the time to understand what the system is, how it works, where the gaps are, where the needs are, and collaborate with it so that we're reaching people in an effective way that's really trauma informed. So that would be the challenge out to readers today, is to really try to find out more about that. And I'm happy to provide that information. Kim can provide that information. We have a huddle that meets every other Friday, so we're happy to engage in that discussion.
Great.
And for me, I go back to housing as an important component of economic development. That realizing that when the city is like through this 150 million, through whatever other tools that are out there, when they choose to partner and really be active participants in public-private partnerships, or to partner in general, whether it's even with financing, that all of that is creating a true public benefit, and that benefit is to provide housing. And I that's what I want people to understand. You have some out there that try to turn that into something that's salacious or not, or a giveaway, but that's not what this is about. There are challenges out there to getting housing on the ground, and when the city participates, they are intentional in their participation, that it provide a public benefit, and this is an investment.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, I think it's important to really define the terms and conditions of this kind of interaction. And in our case, it was just this idea of the social contract. What does it mean? We have to kind of like put heads together and define what does it mean for every side, be very open and transparent about it, and then craft a plan. And it takes leadership to do that. And I kind of, I hope that the sides will take this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I got 3 little things for you. Please, everyone, if you're helping somebody find resources or anything, you need to know sacred.org. That's SACRD.org. Please make sure that if you're trying to find something, food pantries, housing, whatever it is, go to sacred.org. They're redoing our apartment map. So if you've gone to our site and you have a hard time using my map, I know I'm not a tech geek. I tried my best. Sacred is redoing it, so that'll be relaunched in the next couple of weeks. Protest your property taxes. We help homeowners protest, low-income homeowners. We'll help you protest your property taxes for free. 2023 requirements therefore free is if you make less than $45,000 a year, your home value is less than $200,000, and that's your homestead. We will protest those 3 requirements. We will protest your property taxes for free. And we have discount services for everybody else. That's how our nonprofit gets some income. And then, of course, please, again, go to our site and support the policy about it's discounting your property taxes, freezing the property taxes. That is one of the best things I can think of to really help our gentrification issues and keep more people in their homes.
And I know we only have like a minute. I just really quickly, I said it on a podcast when I first started here. It's don't look away. And I know it's really easy when that guy's on the corner. You don't want to make eye contact. I'm not talking about just there, but don't look away. Don't look away from this issue. Don't look away from homelessness. Don't look away from affordable housing. Dig in, get curious. Like I said, you can't, if you look away and ignore it, it's not going to get any better. So dig in and find a way to help and connect.
Awesome. I think that is a wonderful way to conclude this conversation. Like you said, we're just out of time. But I really do want to thank you all so much for participating in this discussion. I hope y'all have a lovely week, and maybe y'all can join us as well for the rest of our City Fest programming. We've got a Bexar County judge debate tonight at 6 o'clock, which should get very spicy. A panel featuring change makers tomorrow at noon, and a wrap-up party in Legacy Park tomorrow night. So if y'all can join us, that would be great. And again, this is all possible because of our presenting sponsors, the City of San Antonio and Bexar County's Economic and Community Development Department. We also thank our engagement and innovation sponsors for supporting this year's event. For a full list of our sponsors and events, please visit www.cityfestsa.org. Thank you all again, our panelists, and I'm sure I will be seeing you around the city.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.